The biggest game of the season might be coming up tomorrow evening against the Dallas Stars. We've said big games of the season before, but this one could actually decide who wins the Central.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, we have a lot to talk about, and chief among them is that perhaps the game of the season might be coming up for the Jets. Before we talk about Winnipeg versus Dallas and why this game really is potentially so special, just wanted to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Stay tuned to hear more about how FanDuel can help you win even bigger. Now, like I said, tomorrow's game, I would rank as potentially one of the games of the season for the Jets. Now, whether Winnipeg actually performs at that level, we'll find out. But in terms of the importance and the stakes, I really don't know if we've had a Jets game with quite the level of intensity and potential as this one does. This game feels like not only perhaps the biggest one for the Jets, but really one of the biggest ones for the overall Western Conference and maybe perhaps a really big impact on the upcoming playoffs. This game for the Jets is really crucial because obviously Dallas is right behind them in the standings. The Stars have a couple of games in hand, and Winnipeg really wants to put some distance between them and first place. And if Winnipeg can pull this off, this should just about give the Jets the biggest edge, not only to win the Central, but also the Western Conference. The President's Trophy is still going to be a little bit more of a dogfight, in part because the Jets have like the sixth hardest schedule remaining, and the Caps have one of the easiest schedules remaining. So President's Trophy may not quite be on the table right now if the Jets maybe have a couple of tough games up ahead. But in terms of the Central and the West, that is very much still Winnipeg's to lose at this point. So this game, the stakes are high. I'm personally very curious to see how Winnipeg actually performs because I've spoken at length about how I have some concerns heading into the postseason about what kind of team this Jets squad will be. The top line has looked pretty bad recently. They've been putting up, 45% shot share and expected goal share, and it's something that you can just visually watch. They're mishandling pucks. They've made some really bad passes, some ugly turnovers, and that can be a really big impediment to a deep playoff run. So I really want to see how the top line responds in this game. They've not been good for the past several, and we really need to see them, especially post Four Nations break, kind of show why they were so hot coming into that break. They really haven't been the same line since, and they've looked more like last year's version. And so against a top playoff team that you are likely to see in the postseason, if not Colorado, the Jets need to, stand up and really show us that, they are serious about changing last year's narrative. I think the previous season, while very successful, certainly did not end well for Winnipeg when it came to the playoffs. And so this game and really the upcoming playoff run really feel like big statement opportunities for this franchise. Winnipeg, they didn't make many trade acquisitions at the deadline. They kind of said in some ways that they trust their guys, even though, I would suspect the Jets were really chasing a bigger fish to reward this team. Obviously, that didn't pan out, so they're just going to have to really lean on their players and who they have internally, and that's where I think there's big opportunity for some of these guys to really step up and embrace that challenge. Now, for Dallas, they are dealing with some interesting stuff right now. This team is a little bit beat up, and perhaps beat up is putting it mildly. They are down Rope Hintz and Heiskanen, which is two very, very critical players. I think both of them are supposed to be back come playoff time. Hintz, I think, is back as early as next week, from what I understand. Heiskanen, I'm not entirely sure how long he's out for, but I would suspect that, the longer term for them, it's a little bit challenging. They're also down Tyler Seguin, Niels Lundqvist. I mean, this team, they're not the same squad that started the season off. But all that said, they are still hot to trot recently. They've been putting up very gaudy results. And up front, they've got Ben, Johnston, and Rantanen, then Robertson, Duchesne, and Gronlund. Finally, Marchment, Bork, and Dodonov. And on the fourth, you've got Back, Steele, and Blackwell. This is a really good four-line team. The only line that I would suggest is maybe one that the Jets can match is the fourth in terms of, a better fourth line, I guess. But Sam Steele's been putting up pretty good results this year. He's been scoring a fair few number of points, so definitely not a matchup to sleep on. But for the most part, this is going to be a very back and forth affair. I do worry that Ben Johnston or Rantanen is going to really have a big field day against the Jets top line. They might also put out the Duchesne line against the Scheifele line. I don't think that particularly favors the Jets. Winnipeg, I think, really has to figure out a way to get the top line going again. If you are going up against Robbo and Duchesne or Johnston and Rantanen, that's not really great for Winnipeg. That's not a matchup that right now favors the Jets if it's against Scheifele. I don't know how I would personally try to do this. The Lowry line, you can only ask to sort of match up so much. And this team is very good on the forecheck, and they're very good on the counters. So for Winnipeg, I do wonder if they're going to spend extended shifts in the defensive zone. I guess the nice thing is that Winnipeg will be at home, so at least, they're not traveling and they can get some rest, but this is going to be a very tough game. The one thing for Dallas that is maybe a big advantage for the Jets is that their defense is not great. Right now, they've got Harley and Lyubushkin, Lindell and Ceci, and Bitchell and Dumba. So this is a unit that you can take advantage of, and Ottinger and DeSmith are not immortal. So for Winnipeg, I think the back end is probably where the Jets have the biggest advantage. But I will say, earlier today we had a skate, and both Ehlers and Pionk were not skating. Now, that I have some concerns about Pionk's game under pressure, but I still prefer him greatly to like a Logan Stanley or something. Colin Miller did rotate in, so maybe he can do the job if he's called up for that, either the second or third pairing. I could also see them maybe promoting Shen if Pionk has to miss. If you recall, Neal went down the previous game and was sort of limping around for a little bit. He did come out and play the rest of the game, but obviously if his foot maybe has some sort of a small fracture or whatever, probably not good for him to put it under too much stress. But as far as Ehlers is concerned, Arniel didn't really say a lot about his injury stuff. Didn't really seem like he was too worried about it. I would imagine for both guys, it's probably a rest and maintenance day, but we'll see, right? Tomorrow's lineup could be very interesting. And if Stanley somehow comes back in, all I can say is good luck to Winnipeg, because that does not favor the Jets. But I guess if I have to give a score prediction for this one, I will go out on a limb and say 4-3 Jets. I feel like this is going to be a very tough one. The special teams for Winnipeg are going to have to be immaculate, and I don't know if the Jets are going to get a lot of power play opportunities. But hey, if they do, that should be advantage Winnipeg. So give me your score predictions below. Let me know what you think is going to happen in this game. This really feels like it could be one to decide the West. So if the Jets come out on the winning end, that is fantastic news. If they don't, they still have one more opportunity later to take it to Dallas. But that's a road game, a lot harder. And I think if you're Winnipeg, you really want to do it right now, right here, and give yourself some margin for error in case things really go wrong later. But of course, we are going to be optimistic about it. Let's hope for the best, even if there's a chance of the worst, because that's how we live as Jets fans. But of course, I also wanted to spend some time looking a little bit towards the past. I wanted to talk about some of my thoughts coming into the year, what's aged well, and what has maybe been a little bit of a surprise for this team, or even a big surprise. We'll chat about all of that as we are coming into the final stretch of the season in just a little bit. Before we go too much further, though, don't want to shout out our friends and partners at Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire somebody yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates quickly? Well, all you need is Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed can help you to stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites because Indeed's sponsored job post gives your post top of the page billing and helps you reach the right candidates faster. As somebody who has used Indeed when I was looking for work some time ago, I can personally attest to the resume builder being powerful and convenient. It's very easy for anyone to use. And once you actually complete it and submit your application and stuff, it immediately pulls up job postings that are relevant to your domain experience, work experience, your salary requirements, and your length of experience, right? This is a great opportunity, a great service. I like Indeed a lot. I think it was very convenient. And for somebody looking to hire top quality candidates, I can only imagine that having such a powerful tool has to be easier than ever. So if you want to speed up your hiring process, you can do so with a special $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on the Locked On Winnipeg Jets podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. While we're here, also wanted to let you know about our friends and partners at Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all the money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And of course, with everything getting more expensive these days, we know that money sometimes flows like water out rather than in. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one convenient place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth, real wealth. Obviously, for a lot of you, you might have a partner or a spouse or something in your life. You can easily collaborate managing money with your partner. All you have to do is just download the app and you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. And again, instead of juggling multiple apps, checking your spending and finances, Monarch can do it all in one place and even helps you set long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode, as we are not only looking towards the future, but also a little bit of the past. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the interesting season expectations that I came in with and how some of them have been very much subverted. Some of them have been maybe tweaked, but still met, and others were just completely, a big shock. So I guess coming into this year, one of the big things that I thought would happen was more of an infusion of youth. I thought the Jets were going to use more kids, and they really leaned veteran heavy. And I initially worried that, Winnipeg was going to try and run it back and do a lot of what they did under Bones, which Arneal has kind of done to a point. I think that he took some of Arneal's ideas about defensive structure and stuff, but overall, Arneal has sort of iterated upon what came before. It's less of a repeat and copy paste and a little bit of an update. That, I think, has kind of worked for the 5v5 game, especially for the depth lines. I think the way that Bones like to do the depth deployments and how physically aggressive and pressuring on the forecheck they could be, that has sort of translated to Arneal's style. Scott has maybe a few different ideas for some of the youth involvement. Cole Perfetti has become a really important player for him, and I think Cole has really started to pay that trust back in dividends. Perfetti has become one of Winnipeg's best skaters this year, especially over the last couple of weeks. And, while the top line may be struggling, Perfetti has not been. He has been absolutely killing it, and I think it's really great to see him take that next step, especially because he was kind of part of that draft class where, COVID really screwed up development for a lot of these kids. And so I think that there's been a bit of a lag time between them not only developing, but also having the kind of impact that a lot of people expect for early 20s players in the pros. Perfetti, I think, was always a little bit of a step ahead just because his brain is so talented and so forward thinking and impressive, but translating that to NHL impact can still be a really big challenge for a top end talent like he is. But on the top line, I guess they also sort of subverted in some ways my expectations for them. I think on the whole, they've been a lot better than they were last year. I will say, though, that comes with a big caveat because compared to other top lines around the league, they're a little more 50-50. They will tend to outscore their opponents in games against middling or bad teams or squads that just give you good defensive opportunities to really seize on bad blue line passes, poor coverages, and stuff like that. So this top line can be very opportunistic, and they've shown that. I think where I continue to feel like I was right about them is that we don't often see them just control games the way that, a McKinnon line can, right? When Nate's out there, not only do the matchups get really focused, but you also see his line just control the ice. And that's something that Winnipeg hasn't really had as much of. They'll have games where they do that against bad opponents. It's been less present against top end teams. That top line is at times not even 50-50 when you start facing really good playoff squads. And so for that reason, on the one hand, I do think they've improved a lot since last year, but I still think that there's a level for them that they really have to reach if they actually want to go deep in the playoffs. I know that is absolutely their objective and their goal, but they may have to be comfortable making some adjustments, not only to their style of play, but to their overall line combinations if they actually want to get to that point. Kyle Connor is probably the guy that I think has really stepped up the most, though. I think he's had an amazing season. I know his past couple of weeks have been just bad recently, but I don't think that really undoes the massive gains, the back checking, the defensive work, the overall improvement in his play that has helped them to really be a top line player this year. In the past, he scored like one, but the rest of his game left a lot to be desired. This year, he's really contributing in all three areas of the ice. I think his overall game has grown leaps and bounds, and it makes me wonder why he didn't do this stuff before. Was he trying to shoot for offense? I don't know. But either way, glad to see that he has really bought in, and if Arniel has managed to make him do this, I think that is a fantastic thing going forward. Another thing that I was I would say semi-right about was that the power play would probably improve, but I don't think I expected it to be top of the league. I thought the Jets would be really happy if their power play was top 10, top 12. They have the top one. And Davis Payne has completely revolutionized their power play unit. We haven't really had a unit that's ever been this dangerous. And I say that because I know that the 17-18 power play was really good and at times automatic, but it was more about specific shooters. Here, we don't have a line A one-timer. Yes, Kyle Connor can kind of be that kind of player at times, but for the most part, what's really changed this power play and set it apart from others is really the on the puck and off the puck movement for all five skaters. They're constantly rotating, constantly swapping roles, and I think that's really had a tremendous impact. There's a video on YouTube that breaks down Winnipeg's power play. I want to say it's across the ice or along the ice or something that broke down the Jets' power play. I had a chance to check it out. It's a really good video. I think you should watch it too if you want to understand some of the more nuanced mechanics and tweaks that Payne has really introduced. But overall, he's been so good that I actually wonder how long the Jets can keep him. Other teams surely are going to be looking for a coaching change at some point. Either summer or maybe beyond. But I think, if Payne is happy here and if the Jets want to just give him a blank check to stay, I would do that. I think he's very clearly right now one of the most important special teams coaching staff members in the whole league. And surely somebody out there is thinking about his forward thinkingness, some of the progressive ideas he's introducing, and wondering if he can channel that into a head coaching role. He hasn't done it in many years, and so I know that it's maybe a bit of a step going from special teams to the big overall head coaching job, but I don't know. The way Payne talks about things, the way that he seems to think about the game, I think he could actually do it and do pretty well at it. So if he does translate this into an NHL full-time head coaching role, congrats to him. I'll be very sad if he leaves the Jets, but it's hard to be upset when somebody gets success elsewhere because of the hard work that they put in for your squad. So, wow, he has been a real godsend for this team. I would say Chenoweth has been pretty solid. I think that PK has generally improved in a lot of areas. I know that it's not been as stark as the power play, but even having like a league average PK is probably not the worst thing. I don't know that it's been as good as I was hoping for. I thought that there would be more pressure and more collapsing of space, but I just don't think the Jets have the skaters right now who can really do it. And so, when you see Scheifele and Connor and stuff out there doing the power kill, that I think is a really nice change, and it has had a positive impact. So Chenoweth, he may not get as many roses, but I do see some of the shades of improvement that you really want to see on this PK unit that last year and in previous seasons was like last in the league. So big ups. But I guess if we want to talk high level, what did, either I get right or wrong, I will say I did not expect the Jets to be in first place. And that, going all the way back to my point about this year being more youth-based, because they shifted more veteran-C or veteran heavy, and they've had not only career years from Connor Hellebuck, but really from this power play unit, they have been able to get away with a lot. And the rest of the NHL took a surprising step back this year. I thought that they would still be pretty strong across the board. That's not really happened. A lot of teams have kind of been mid by comparison. So, the Jets have really taken advantage and built themselves a tremendous lead at the top, even if, right now the Caps are right there with them. Obviously, the Jets still are in really good position to win the West. They have a shot at the President's Trophy. That was never on my cards for the season. I didn't think that would be possible. Even after the successes of last year, I thought the Jets might be due for a little bit of a step back this year, but it seems like they've been able to recreate some of their success with some new additions that have really turned this team into one of the squads that I think others are really afraid of. So it will be very interesting to see how it all translates in the playoffs. I really hope that we have a deep playoff run, multiple rounds of hockey. I'm expecting at least to reach the second round, hopefully a conference final somewhere not long after that. This team has come too far to not get that reward. So let me know which expectations you think you had and which of those were met, which of those were subverted. Drop your comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. In just a little bit, I did want to talk about more future casting and really talking about some of the Jets' youth and which guys I'm really hoping to see get a shot in the pros next year. Because I think that's one sticking point that I continue to have is that the youth pipeline, if you're not going to trade for players at the deadline, then you've got to make your kids a bigger part of the team. And I think that coming up this following season, that might be an even bigger storyline. So we'll chat about that in just a sec. But before we go any further, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. As a Maryland fan, although I say that very loosely, I don't follow college basketball that much. It's probably not my year. The Maryland program's still rebuilding, but a lot of you are probably fans of some of the top programs around the country, Gonzaga and, a few others, just to name a few. Again, not super familiar with college basketball, but I know that March Madness is the most exciting time for so many of you. And if you're thinking about some underdogs or perhaps some favorites, this is a great chance to cash in. FanDuel is super easy to use, secure, and you can stay up to date on the latest action even when games are ongoing. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. If your first $5 bet wins, you get $200 in bonus bets to win even more. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us as we are just wrapping up a little bit with some, we're kind of bouncing between present, past, future, all sorts of fun stuff. And for me, one of the bigger things that I've sort of wondered about this team really coming into the season and beyond, I just kind of wondered where, the Jets are planning to use their youth, right? I think Winnipeg has generally tried to go for a very veteran-heavy approach, and for me, I just in past seasons, I haven't liked that, right? This year, I think it's been okay, and I think that they've, generally gotten away with it. It's worked out pretty well for them, but I still, longer term, have a lot of questions about how the team views its youth. This squad really does need to start incorporating more of the kids. I think Winnipeg oftentimes runs into the scenario where their ceiling is a little bit capped out at what we're seeing right now, and they need some young, skilled talent that they've drafted and developed to actually make the NHL. look at how important Cole Perfetti has become to this team, right? He is a cornerstone now of the top 9. Dylan Sandberg has become an elite left-sided defender, very clearly the second best blue liner on the team in terms of overall defensive impact. He is the Jets' number 1 skater, and he has really stabilized the blue line that past the Morrissey pairing did not have a lot to work with. So you look at that and you realize that there aren't really many other prospects joining this team as of late. The Jets are going to have to start bringing these kids in, and they can't wait for them to turn 22, 23, 24 before they start getting NHL reps. The Jets just aren't a team that I feel has as much of a margin for error. We don't have elite talent in the top 6 the way that some of those crazy teams do, and so the Jets really need more from their scoring by committee approach. And right now, they've got a really good thing going for the most part, but there is a little bit of a limit and a ceiling to just how much they can create and score. I think if you look at their 5v5 results, it's a little more modest than you might expect. And so for the Jets, a couple of players stand out to me. One is Colby Barlow, and Barlow is one of those prospects that I was relatively comfortable with trading. I don't know if he'll ever really be a full-time NHLer. I'm not going to write him off, but I do think that his overall game and results so far haven't really flown off the page. But he is physically mature. He's got a very big shot. And I guess it's probably worth finding out if he can be something at the pro level. He'll be eligible to join the Moose this coming year, I believe. And so with that in mind, I would like to see if maybe some of his, technicals and mechanics can get some work. I think the skating's probably one of the biggest things that might be holding him back right now. Otherwise, for the Jets, I think he could serve as maybe a third line finisher, right? Maybe a guy who's big on the puck, who's relatively physical, and who's got a big shot. I don't think he's like a guy who's going to go out chasing hits all the time, and he's not like the craziest forechecker, but he's got size, he's got strength, and he's got a lethal release. At some point, maybe he can channel that into something to maybe be like a 15, 20 goal kind of guy. If that's what he becomes for Winnipeg or for another team, I think that that's actually really successful, especially if he can maybe put up like 40 to 50 points a year. I think that there is a version of him that can do that. I don't know if the Jets are going to be the one to find out, but if he does do relatively well early in the Moose season next year, maybe he gets an NHL debut sometime, in that season or the following. So keep an eye out for him if he's not traded by then. He's an intriguing prospect in terms of, being a strong locker room guy. I just wonder about the skill ceiling with him. Another player that I think will actually have a real shot at making the Jets next season and having a real impact on this team, it's Braden Yeager. And he might be the reason why the Jets did not really close down the Brock Nelson deal. Yeager has become a big part of Winnipeg's prospect core. He looks like a bona fide middle to top 6 center, and his defensive maturity, I think, immediately stood out in camp, as well as like the two-way and playmaking acumen. There was some really soft hands he displayed, very good passer. I know people will look at his, the World Juniors performance and not really be impressed. I don't really look at that at all. I look at, his performance elsewhere, how he looked in camp with some of his peers and some of the older players. He immediately stood out on almost every shift. I think that he could become a really, really good center for the Jets. Again, I don't quite know how high his ceiling goes, but I do think that he's a lot closer to being pro-ready than he is far. I think among all of the Jets prospects, he might actually be the closest to the NHL when it comes to our forwards. Shiberkov is also right there with him, but Yeager might be even a little more defensively resolute and a little more complete as a player. So I think he has a very bright future for Winnipeg. I do understand why the Jets were a little bit hesitant to give him up. I still would have thought about it given the playoff field, but if the Jets do actually intend to make him a bigger part of their core as early as next season or maybe the following season, I will feel better about it. Again, how they incorporate the youth will really color how I feel about some of the approaches that they've had with their recent trade deadlines. So make more use of the youth, and you don't have to trade for as much when the trade deadline even comes around. The last guy that I sort of wonder about is Brad Lambert. He's currently tied for first with scoring in the Moose. It's up there with Toninato and Shaw. Manitoba's not really scoring a lot, so for him to have 27 points on this team is actually pretty good. Surprisingly, most of them are all assists, right? He's been a big setup guy, not really finishing a lot of opportunities. Not quite sure what's going on with that, but If he is somebody who's going to be a wide playmaker and creator, I don't think that that's the worst outcome. And I think for the Jets, they're really hoping that he can become a force of offense, probably at wing. I don't think he's really going to be a center at the NHL level. I could be wrong about that. I just think, given what the Jets are going for and how he's being deployed, I don't see him really becoming Winnipeg's 2C unless there's a big change and something very surprising in his development. I think he's predominantly going to use his speed and skill as a winger, which not the worst outcome, but I do think Winnipeg was hoping that he'd be a little more complete at center. He still seems a little further off, but if he gets an audition here towards the end of the season, again, from his injury stint earlier this year, maybe he shows enough to get a longer look as part of the Black Aces squad. But I think next year is probably the best shot of us seeing him in a bigger NHL role, not this year. And even then, that's a little questionable. So we'll just have to wait and see. But let me know what prospects you think are going to make the jump. Elias Salamonson may have a shot at it, depending on what happens with Winnipeg's right side. There's a lot of names right there on the sheet as of right now with some terms, so I'm not really expecting him to make that jump quite yet. But I will say he's probably not too long for the Jets. So again, let me know which ones you think will make the jump soon. Drop your predictions below, or again, at my social medias. But for tonight's episode, obviously, that is going to be all the time that we have. Tomorrow, we will have Winnipeg versus Dallas. Big recap, hoping for a big win. I really want to chat about the implications of that game, especially if the Jets come away with a win. Or if they don't, we might explore what has to happen for Winnipeg to then clinch both the Central and the West. But we'll chat about that later. For tonight's show, that's going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. We'll see you back here tomorrow, so see you then. Have a great night, and as always, go Jets go.